Sorry, just dropped.
We had some sandwiches and stuff there. Oh, there's a friend. No, it's like.
You all drive up this morning.
Yeah.
I just have a picture. It's like,
Yeah, it's a little thing just right on the
it just,
a little handle here.
it's like, peeking over.
Like, it's gonna be like an.
It was like,
Yes.
it was like a kind of a show. It was like, where they,
Yeah.
you know, like when you get,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's always pretty, but
First
it
floor.
was just this like, it's just sort of like, kind of this.
My brain's
You got a time about 45 minutes. Kind of break it. Like, it's gonna be a good session. Just like.
All right.
I don't want to just like.
Thanks everyone for showing up today. I think Toby Nielsen is on his way, but we do have a quorum. Mike Machezik is on Teams and Lyle and I are here. As I walked through the front door this morning, I was talking to Commissioner Moppin and I said, it's so fun when we have topics like this, talk about housing and, you know, things that are really important to us. But really both topics are, we're looking forward to having a good discussion. So I wanted to thank everyone for showing up. We're going to do official roll call. I'm going to ask Rob to do your roll call of the commission because I believe there's some people on screen. And then I would like, Meredith, I'm going to give you an assignment. Would you help us with introductions of everyone here? Some of the people I got a chance to meet, but if we could recognize all our visitors and partners. Okay. So roll call for City Council.
Mayor Giles,
Here.
Councilmember Nelson,
Present.
Councilmember Machezik.
Here.
I see you.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Chris Proof, he's there.
We can't hear you.
His microphones.
You can't hear me?
Nope.
I can hear you. So it's a room thing.
I haven't, you cannot hear me?
I can see that you're talking and that your mic is open, but we can't hear you.
See if anyone else.
Liz, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Well, Liz,
I
if
could
you're talking-
try to, I set it up the same way I did last night. I could try to
It's a room thing. I
What's
can
that?
hear Mike and I can hear each other. The room can't hear us.
Okay. Okay, Liz, can you talk?
Testing now?
Yep.
Testing.
Yeah, I hear you, Liz.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Liz. We got our sound system cranked up a little bit.
Oh, great.
On to, if you would have your folks check in, Liz checked in with us.
Yep.
The room is really quiet now. Very hard to hear.
Yeah. Liz and I are having the same experience.
It's still pretty quiet.
They're working on it.
Somebody on the phone. Could the caller that's on the phone please identify yourself?
Yeah, hi, this is Marcia Woody calling in. It looks like the live stream's not working again.
Thanks, Marcia.
Just getting started. Council. Okay, and we make sure that everyone gets introduced, our guests and our partners.
Yeah, I think Michelle's gonna try to log out and log back in. See if we have.
I think they're logging out and logging back in.
Okay, how does that sound, Mike and Liz?
It's
Better?
still, it's better, but it's still pretty quiet.
Same experience.
Okay, well, let's get going and we'll have our IS. Yeah. Then I'll pass it over. Yeah, and I think maybe just before we jump into presentations and let's just go around and do introductions because I'm not sure if we knows each other. Then we'll do in room first and then we'll move on to the screen.
In the interim here, we can make an effort to speak quite loudly.
Yeah. Thanks, Lyle. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, I guess I'll kick it off. I'm Bree Zach. I'm the new housing program manager. And then next to me is...
My name's Bart Cochran. I'm the CEO and founder of Leap Housing, nonprofit housing developer. I do.
My name is Tyler Ross. I'm the feasibility specialist with LEAP, so I'm involved in projects development and feasibility studies.
My name is Douglas Peterson. I'm the consultant for Leap Housing. I was director of the housing company who built the spring. Eastern part.
Out south.
Southern.
Yeah. Middle school.
We know where it's at. Yeah.
I'll leave that.
Robert Lyons, chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, also a board member of the Central Mountain Housing Trust.
Nelson,
All City.
Bob Giles, City Council, Mayor. And,
Trustee Joe Wagner, City Clerk.
4 seconds.
And Michelle Grunewald, I'm the Community and Economic Development Director. So just a quick overview for this morning. Our first session is going to be on housing. And Bree is primarily providing sort of a presentation and some kind of background and context. And then we'll get into allowing the LEAP team to kind of introduce themselves and provide more information about kind of what they do. We'll have an opportunity for questions and discussion. And the second item this morning is going to be on zoning code amendments. So we do have one consultant online. So Melissa, you can just hang tight because we're going to talk about housing probably for the next hour. And then we'll get into that discussion. So I think we're in a pretty exciting place in terms of our housing program. We put a lot of time and effort in developing sort of the right policies. We've secured some funding at this point. And finally, we have a full-time staff person. So we've added a lot of capacity to actually implement our local housing action plan. So I'm going to get into some kind of specifics about implementation. And this is really Bree's first opportunity to kind of meet and present with the council and meet the commission. So I'm happy to have her. And I think with that, we'll turn it over to me.
Michelle, can I interrupt? I'm sorry. We did have a public comment on the agenda, so I didn't know if anybody that was online or anybody in the room. Sorry about that.
Had sign-ups outside, did you? No one signed up online.
Correct, no one signed up online. I just didn't know if she wanted to make videos online or if Sherry wanted to make it.
He's here to listen.
She's still on.
Yep.
Marcia, this is Mayor Bob. Would you like to make a general comment? We started our meeting off with that 3-minute opportunity to address the council and address Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I don't have any comment at this time. I'm just listening. Although if there's slides that are available because the live stream is not working, if they could be posted somewhere, that would be great. If not, I understand. But just wanted to follow along. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. It might be up and going now. We've been working on it, but thank you for that.
Not yet, but I'll keep checking.
Marcia, can you see this slide? She's on the phone.
I'm also trying to see the YouTube, and the YouTube's not working yet. Just says waiting for City of McCall.
We'll be able to post it up afterward.
Yeah,
We can't get it going.
we'll get it to you, Marcia, and hopefully the IS will get it up and running here.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, all right, should I get going? All right. So today I'm here to ask council if you're supportive of city staff exploring working with the not housing nonprofit Leap Housing, who are with us here today, as you all know, to develop housing units on city-owned land. This is still very preliminary, but we just want to check with you to see if this is something you might be interested in moving forward. Before getting to the proposal, I'll start with a brief introduction about myself, as I know some of you a little bit, and then share some of the work I've been doing so far, and then review a few key housing terms. From there, I'll walk through the proposal, provide some background on the topic, outline the potential project, and then leave some time for questions at the end. So a little about me. I was actually born and raised in McCall. Since leaving, I have lived in 3 countries and 4 different states, and I'm very excited to be back. I started my government career actually in New Zealand, where I was managing tourism sites and trail systems. I really enjoyed public service when I was there and making a difference in the community where I lived. So after my MBA, I was working as a consultant, and I was really excited when Blaine County Housing Authority reached out for help launching a new 51-unit building in downtown Ketchum. Here is a picture of that development. This is where I truly dove into the housing world. Within 2 months, I was project managing this building for the city of Ketchum, and then also running all the organization's operations. Fast forward to this past June, I joined the city of McCall, where I now manage our current housing programs and lead efforts to implement the local housing action plan. Over the past couple months, I've been super impressed by the city's housing work so far, especially because multiple departments were taking on this massive effort alongside their other responsibilities. I'm excited to help focus this work, and I want to briefly highlight the work that I've done so far. One of my first priorities was updating the city's website with clear program information and general housing resources, as many residents were unaware of what our programs were and didn't have an easy place to find housing resources and on their rights and responsibilities. I also spent time learning about McCall's housing climate by speaking with residents, program participants, employers, property managers, developers, and real estate agents. These conversations really helped me learn the current housing needs, local wage trends, affordability expectations, and how our programs are functioning so far. Shortly after I joined, our consultant, Adrian Quinn, drafted the new housing policies. I refined them for clarity, launched them, and posted them online to improve the transparency and provide clear administrative guidance going forward. Partnerships has also been a really big part of my job so far. I've collaborated with St. Luke's on their deed restrictions of their first 8 units of the 38-unit planned homes, 4 which are now under construction. And after this meeting, I'm actually going to go over and see those 4 homes, which is really exciting. I've also been working with the Idaho Ward team to talk about how the leasing up process will go for their 31 local housing units. And beyond these bigger projects, I've also been in contact with various groups who are interested in or supporting local housing right now. A significant part of my time, though, recently has been working on compliance. While this has been extremely challenging, this work is super essential. This is super essential as to ensure that homes are being used for their intended purpose and public resources are protected. Since starting, 1 out of compliance deed restricted home has been brought into compliance. by being put up for sale and bought by a local employee and a disabled veteran. And another ground lease home is now available for sale. Looking ahead, I plan to continue refining and growing our programs, strengthening partnerships, and moving to build new homes. So to ensure that we're all on the same page, I wanted to go over a few terms. I understand this will be a review for some. So starting with affordable housing. Affordable housing is generally defined as a household spending 30% or less of their pre-tax income on housing, which includes utilities. This definition comes from the federal agency, Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. HUD puts out a number for the middle income for a community and calls it the area median income, or AMI. This is the industry standard used to guide housing policies, funding decisions, and program requirements. And then one big program that HUD puts together and states administer is called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program, or LIHTC. This is one of the most common funding sources used in affordable housing projects because it provides a dollar for dollar reduction in taxes for developers and investors. Luckily, these programs funds were actually expanded through the Big Beautiful Bill. In the Springs pictured here, and we have luckily Doug with us too, utilized this funding source to build its 72 affordable units in 2010 and 2016. So a lot of people, when you start talking about affordable housing, they worry that it'll look bad or be out of place in a community. And this is not the case for dignified housing. I'm a major advocate, as I'm sure everybody in this room is, that any housing development, everyone deserves a quality home that provides occupants with safety, peace, and a sense of self-respect. Over the years, there's been a lot of different definitions for local housing, and the Local Housing Action Plan defines it as dwellings of all types that those who live and or work in the McCall area can afford or purchase or rent, serving the entire spectrum of housing needs that are not being met by the housing market. So one tactic McCall City has done so far to provide local housing is through a ground lease. In this model, a privately owned home is built on city-owned land, and the city leases the land to the homeowner with certain stipulations. For those who qualify for the local housing subsidy, the land is leased for $1 per year, and those who do not qualify, the lease rate is 5% of the land cost per year. This approach allows local homeowners to significantly reduce their housing costs as they're purchasing just the structure and not the land. And another tactic we have been using is a deed restriction. This is a long-term restriction of who can live in a home and how it can be used. I'm going to dive a little bit more into the deed restrictions because this will likely be what we'll be using in a potential housing development. So our deed restriction program is currently administered through the Local Housing Incentive Program. These restrictions remain in place even when a home is sold or rented to a new occupant. And to qualify for these homes, occupants must be a full-time resident of McCall area, meet one of the following criteria. Either work 30 plus hours a week for a McCall area employer, be a local retiree, a local person with a disability. And there are two types of deed restrictions in this program, income restricted and not, each with cash incentives of $20,000 or $10,000. And this money is a payment to the developer or the homeowner who decides to restrict their home. And currently there are 15 occupied homes with 39 deed restricted homes coming soon. There are currently no income restricted homes currently built because this is a new program that you all approved recently, but 8 employer-owned income restricted homes are coming soon. So
can I just add something? Yeah. So just to talk a little bit more about the deed restriction, basically the point of this is a pretty common tactic in other mountain communities. And, we have some examples of communities that have been doing this for years. Essentially what you're doing here is anybody who can get into the market is gonna just or rent within the market. But you have this whole segment of your population where there's a disconnect between what they make and what they can afford. And so what you're doing is essentially you're creating a secondary market for locals. And so that's really the purpose of this deed restriction program is to allow locals to compete among locals as opposed to having a much broader marketplace where it's really challenging for locals to compete when people and are willing to pay cash and see our values going up. So that really is kind of the intent of this. And the longer these programs exist and the more that they're funded, the more units we can get and more of that market share. It also, what that does is the more units you have, the more chance of holding on to your local, right? And that's the goal, is how do we stay a real community with locals who live here and not just become a place where a vacation place where it's just second homeowners and everybody's sort of driving to what they can afford, right? So that's the goal of this program, and I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah.
Just to give it some context.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll give a little bit more information about the deed restrictions and their benefits, because often when I'm talking to people, they get a little freaked out when I say deed restrictions. And the most common concern I hear is about affordability caps, or the idea that the homeowner are limited of how much they can sell the home for in the future. So all deed restricted homes have an income cap, or sorry, not income cap, appreciation cap, which is tied to inflation, or 3% per year. The purpose of these caps is to protect the homeowner or the renter from market volatility. And our goal is for more than just one person who happened to have bought at the right time to benefit from an attainable, stable home. So for example, a home in 2015 sold for $178,000, and now it's listed for $729,000. But if it had been deed restricted, it would be selling for $262,000. And this is a difference between this home being affordable for somebody who makes $32 an hour versus $79 an hour. And the homeowner is still making $84,000 during that sale. It's also worth noting that some people use deed restrictions as starter homes, or they could live in them for life. But for the starter home group, it gives them a really good place to start building equity, have a stable place to live, and save for the future. And I do understand the importance of investments. I went to business school after all, but I think it's really important to understand that homes aren't the only thing you can invest in. And even if you aren't getting a high rate of return by your home, you can also invest in other things. Along those same lines, a home can't be an investment if you can't even afford to buy it in the first place. As Michelle was talking about, ultimately, we're trying to create a locals only market. It is super vital in a community like ours, where the housing market extends far beyond the 4,000 residents here. And like Michelle said, a lot of these external buyers have higher incomes, higher salaries, and can come in with cash offers. And to highlight the locals only market we've created already through the programs so far, I just wanted to highlight some of the stuff I learned during compliance. So there are currently 18 different employers represented across our 25 city administered restricted local housing unit, which includes the deed restricted homes and the ground leased homes. I'll give you a few moments to look at all of these employers. I also asked about household wages. 11 out of the 24 households provided this information. So this is a snapshot, so I'll give you that caveat. But I wanted to highlight that individual hourly rates of our local employees, because I don't think the federal numbers, which suggest the median household in McCall make about $50 an hour, is quite accurate. The minimum hourly rate reported is $18 an hour, and the highest was $54. And then the next highest was $39 an hour. So that makes our average wage more around $29 an hour for McCall area employers. In addition to surveying the current residents, I evaluated the current market beyond the reports and studies, as I know we've done so many of those and they have awesome information. But I just really want to zero in what's a snapshot of what's on the market today. And I looked at Zillow's listings, sale and rentals listing. Also, this was kind of a self-serving activity because I was looking for housing myself. All right, so this is a unit I toured. $1,500 a month for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. The income to make this house affordable is $26 an hour, so that's a little lower than our average that I found during compliance. Per city code, this unit cannot be used for a short-term rental, as its sleeping areas are required to have an emergency exit that opens to the exterior of the building, and the only windows in this unit were in the living room. Further, only one bedroom is fully enclosed, which is this one, and the other bedroom is a semi-open lofted area to the main area. 4 units in October were similar to this unit with no emergency exits beyond the front door. Looking broadly at the prices per month for rentals, everything kind of hovers around that $2,000 mark, even for 1 to 3 bedrooms. And then also the inventory shows mostly there's 3 bedrooms available. So there's 10 3 bedrooms available. And this suggests that we don't have many 1 to 2 bedroom opportunities. I also looked at the lease length and how long these ads were posted for. 10 units were available for 1 month leases, 3 units were available for 6 to 8 months, and 10 units for 12+ month leases. And the majority of these listings were on the market for 31 to 45 days, suggesting the consumer doesn't want or can't afford what the supplier is providing. Here is a home on the market for $449,000. It's an older 3-bedroom, 3-bath mobile home conversion with a garage. I calculated the monthly payment utilizing current interest rates and a 5% down payment. It would be around $3,684 per month. Given this monthly payment, the estimated income to be affordable is $64 an hour, or $134,000 a year. This home has been in the market for 200 days. When I was taking a snapshot of the market, 92 homes were listed, but only 80 of those were under $2 million. I focused on these homes. The average price, again, are similar for 1 to 2 bedrooms, sitting around that $600,000 mark. And then it jumps up to $800,000 for 3 bedrooms. You may notice that there are some minimum numbers that can seem pretty reasonably priced, but it's important to note that these include timeshares and Forest Service recreation cabins that can only be occupied part of the year. I'll also say the market isn't great for local residents who live and work in McCall, and we've been talking about this for a really long time. We've all heard the stories of employers not being able to recruit employees due to housing challenges or qualified applicants not being considered due to not living in the area. There have been news articles, law reviews, reports, all discussing the housing crisis for years. Luckily, there have been a lot of community members, employers, and the city has been making big efforts to relieve the pressure, but more needs to be done. And we're hoping to do just that and considering 2 potential projects. These projects would create both rental and ownership opportunities, resulting in approximately 45 new homes on 2 distinct city-owned sites. In the past, several local housing projects have been discussed in conversations with developers, kind of what Leap Housing was actually part of a number of these, have taken place. The city has developed key relationships, and now that my position has been added, we have the capacity to build on these efforts and push things forward. These two projects represent a significant first step, and based on my review of our extensive planning documents and seeing the support of community members towards local housing, this is a strong time to move forward. So early in the 2018 comprehensive plan, it highlights some of the big ideas that should be addressed by the city. And the number one is housing our local community. Then in 2022, Local Housing Action Plan, it proposes how to address housing challenges through public-institutional organizations partnering with the private sector for the development expertise to build local housing on publicly owned land. And then it also further states, the funds from federal or state governments are competitive and require a complicated grant application and administrative process. Sophisticated developer required. This highlights the need for the city to partner with a sophisticated developer if we want to take advantage of federal and state resources. An excerpt from the 2019 McCall Civic Campus Master Plan states, both preferred options also offer the opportunity for the city, if desired, to solicit through a request for proposal process for private developers for the creation of a mixed-use development along the First Street edge to include potential commercial space and or multifamily housing. Then in the 2018 housing strategy, shows that the workforce housing trend in 2014 in relation to people where people live and work, 67% of employers are commuting into McCall from outside, and 19% live in McCall and are employed outside, and 14 are employed and work in McCall. In 2024, you all might remember that the housing consultant, Adrienne Quinn, presented her evaluation of the local housing incentive program. She highlighted the lack of opportunities for the lower income residents and emphasized the importance of targeting this group. Currently, 45% of the McCall residents make under $50,000 per year. The market and other developers are focused on serving the higher income households. For example, the Idaho and Ward project has 31 local rental units, and their caps of their income cap is 120% of AMI, which is around $125,000 per year. Because of the significant need for housing at 50% AMI and the market's inability to meet that need, we're considering a LIHTC development. McCall hasn't had a LIHTC development since 2016 with the development of the Springs. And looking at the 2020 to 2024 allocation of tax credits shows similar communities to ours being awarded these credits like Driggs and Ketchum. And we think it's our time to apply again. We think a great location for a LIHTC project is the northwest corner of the city campus near the senior center in Central District Health. This piece of land has long been underutilized, typically empty or used for storage, as you can see in this old GIS photo, and it's currently home to 2 dumpsters. We believe that this would be an excellent location for a 30-unit downtown infill project. The site is within the civic zone, where density is approved by administrative permit and by utility allowances. It's also within the urban renewal district and could bring vitality to the city's core. It's close to grocery stores, retail shops, community spaces, healthcare services, and major employees. Oh, and also the school, of course. Proximity to the services is also important in securing an important factor in securing tax credits. As the state uses a point-based system that considers factors like access to goods and services, project size, which is why we have the 30 units, because that's kind of the sweet spot for LIHTC projects, private and public monetary contributions, and the track record of a LIHTC developer. Fortunately, this is city-owned land, and using city-owned land for development is considered a monetary contribution. This helps reduce the overall cost of the project and increases the likelihood of securing tax credits. Because a LIHTC project would require extensive and a highly competitive application process, we'd look to partner with an experienced LIHTC developer. And luckily, we were fortunate to have one with us here today, Leap Housing. So Leap Housing, as they mentioned previously, is a housing nonprofit in Idaho that focuses on building and preserving affordable housing across Idaho. In addition to development, they've been doing a lot of work with trainings and coordinating a statewide housing network, which I've been really impressed as I've joined their calls to support communities across Idaho. One of the things that really sets Leap Housing apart is their emphasis on dignified design, creating homes that are high quality, thoughtful, and built to last. To date, they've developed 186 homes, both ownership and rentals, across 13 developments. They're also highly experienced with the LIHTC program. In fact, in the most recent 2025 round, Leap was awarded 2 out of the 7 LIHTC projects statewide and out of 14 total applications. They have a strong record of success and deep understanding of what it takes to win these competitive awards. As I mentioned, Leap Housing is based in Boise, and they've been actually working with the city of McCall for a number of years. And they've also built strong relationships with funding partners, contractors, and community organizations. They also have Doug Peterson on their team, which he's here today, which is awesome because he's actually built a LIHTC project here in McCall. And we're grateful to have him here today with us. Additionally to the LIHTC project, we also believe Leap Housing could be a strong fit to help develop a lower density home ownership program or project on Flynn Lane, as they've had similar success with similar developments as seen in this top picture here. The Flynn Lane property is a piece of undeveloped flat land owned by the city. It already has services on the street, which makes it more feasible and cost effective to build on. Our goal for this site is to mimic a neighborhood feel with lower density of around like 16 homes. This allows us to create a well-designed living space while keeping the development compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Because we take the land cost out of the development because it is city land, the overall cost of the project will be decreased. This gives us an opportunity to deliver attainable homes for local residents at a reduced cost in a great location right next to Ponderosa State Park. So before opening up for questions, I just want to check with Michelle and see if she had anything to add. Okay.
Just to emphasize, the Flynn Lane project is envisioned to be a home project, whereas the campus project is.
Yeah, so want to reintroduce Bart Cochran, founder, CEO of Leap Housing, and then we have Tyler Ross, the feasibility specialist, and then Doug Peterson, the consultant with Leap Housing. That they're also here to help answer questions if you might have some for them. And start the discussion, I wanted to lead with the question of, does the City Council support or have any questions about our exploration in developing these 2 local housing projects in partnership with Leap Housing? So this time I'd like to open the floor for you all.
We want to just have, Bart, do you want to just provide a little bit more information? I know like he kind of gave an overview.
And we can probably pick up, most. You did such a good job. I think you've got a really great asset in Hire with her experience working in Blaine County. So I think our experience, at least on this most recent iteration of exploring the possibility of housing in McCall, it seems like the city's really at like this really right point. To be able to take all the efforts that have been worked through and catalyze those into a little bit larger projects that can really increase the total supply. So I think it's a really sort of exciting moment, something a little bit larger scale, and sort of see the fruit of all that work that you've been doing so much. Like we I don't think communities in Idaho get enough credit for like doing a lot with a little. And really figuring out these solutions. So I think that's something you should hear us give you kudos that like you're doing really good stuff with very limited resources. And we really desire to see the community be able to put together projects that would create a meaningful housing units. And this is something if we don't want to nerd out too much on the nuances of the types of projects, but McCall is particularly difficult for this type of housing development. And so our approach in terms of requesting that we work directly together and start as early as possible has to do with some of the barriers around building and developing this type of housing in the city of McCall. There are some advantages, as Bree mentioned. There hasn't been an award in a period of time that gets some extra points. But housing costs, the cost of construction directly is expensive, as you well know. But there are these other point scoring criterias that are a part of the way these come together that the community doesn't score very well. For example, the community is not a qualified census tract, and it's not a difficult to develop area. Although you might say, how is that even possible? Well, the federal government designates those sections. And so as a result, you don't have a pile of low-income housing tax credit developers banging on the door because it's difficult to make a project work in McCall. The financials are difficult because you don't get what's called a 30% bonus as a result of being in those designations. And so we sort of were, as a nonprofit mission-oriented organization, we're with you in this, and we hear your desire to create this type of housing, and we want to see it happen. But it's going to take some extra work and some real creativity to really put together an application that will be as competitive as we wanted to. Because if we're going to put the work together to put an application together, we want to make sure it wins. And so that's, just something to kind of point out why we think that it's really important to work directly with a very mission-aligned developer that really put our heads together to say, how do we put the absolute best foot forward for the community? Some of those other mountain communities that have received those credits have some of those advantages of being in those qualified census tracts and scoring in some other ways. And so we're going to work really hard to try to figure out how to balance those things out to make sure that the project would be really competitive. And then I think the other thing that I just want to share is we really think, when we think about putting on our tool belt of resources for the community, we think of doing the work in rentership, homeownership, and preservation. So we're at the same time thinking about how do you keep the existing housing stock. But rentership and homeownership are important to us because we're always thinking about this equitable way of looking at housing, and that if we can create a rental opportunity, which is really, really important, we also want to give people a trajectory. And unfortunately, in many communities now, especially mountain communities, the jump from rental housing to homeownership is impossible. I could say in mountain communities, we would say it's impossible. In other communities, it's just more difficult. So giving people a laddering, a stair-step opportunity to get into a wealth building, a generational wealth opportunity through ownership is like this aspirational piece. We understand, and this is a good reflection of that. You'll notice that the homeownership project is smaller than the rental project, and that's pretty proportionate with the populations that we serve, is that not everybody can make the jump to homeownership, but we want to be able to create that stair step, that sort of jumping spot to be able to get people to launch from rental housing. And what's neat about that is when we can do that, it then frees up space. So we're filling up a rental unit with a household who's living and maybe working in the community, both at 14% of the population that both works and lives in the community, and that they're then aspirationally working towards a homeownership opportunity, continuing to point to it. And when they move and make that leap, they're opening up a space inside of the rental opportunity, which then allows us to bring somebody else in. So we're creating a moving, I don't know, we look at it as a stair step, maybe it's like, I wish it was that easy, right? It's probably like big jumps, but that's just a framework that's important. And we're, as an organization, we're the only statewide housing organization that does both. There's both a community land trust, meaning a home ownership strategy for this income restricted, perpetually affordable ownership strategy, and also a rental housing developer. So we balance those two things, and they're very different in the way that they're operated, the way that they're developed, how the funding goes together. And so oftentimes developers will choose one or the other. And so it was really important to us that we make sure to carry both, which makes for a really, what we think is a more holistic look at putting this type of housing.
I'm thinking our analogy in the call should be like not climbing stairs or an escalator, but like climbing a mountain.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We'll build the visual. I'm sure I see it.
So.
Already.
On slick rock.
So Bree asked us a really great question. I wanted to, before we answer and provide, or just wanted to say that they're really good. Enjoyed the people. Well, thanks for bringing that to all our. So speaking as one member of council, I'm very excited. Thumbs up. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. But as Bart said, really important. This property. That's a significant thing that. Anyway, I'm excited. And like I said, I'm sure there's lots of questions and I have a lot of conflict.
I guess what I want to add, we want to make sure you guys are part of the process like throughout the thing. So this isn't like the last time you're going to be hearing about this. This is just the first. So thank
This
you.
is our first touch, just to introduce the concept, to get a general sense. Is this a direction where you want staff to spend resources? Also knowing that we'll be working on other things. We also have other properties available that could be future projects and could be structured slightly different as well. But we thought these two projects are projects that we feel ready to go now.
Yeah, I agree. So let me make sure everybody can count gets these questions. And hear their thoughts. So let me start with Mike. Mike, can you hear me? This is Mayor Bob.
I can hear you now. Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yes, I am and have been for years in support of utilizing the Flynn Lane parcels towards workforce housing. So absolutely on board with that. And I think at least exploring that further is important. I think I'd probably want to have a little more detail on and look a little more deeply into the civic campus area. But Flynn seems like pretty much a no-brainer to me.
But Mike, the civic campus, you'd like to see that explored at least, be able to maybe answer some of your questions.
Yeah, I think looking at a little bit more. So I haven't been able to, it's my problem for not being there, not been able to hear everything. But yeah, I think I am on board with, and I think that our community is on board with us moving forward in this direction. There may be more, I guess the question, and again, unless I missed something in the packet, I didn't have any of the documents to review before, as far as looking into that more. So the short version is yes, I think we should look into both of these properties further. We should look into it with this type of an arrangement. So as far as continuing to move forward, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And Michelle, you mentioned this is our first time.
Yeah.
Okay. We go to line.
Okay. I'll type 2 words that Mike and Mayor Bob used. Mike said absolutely. I'd use that word. Bob said excited. I can buy that word. But the words I would typically use is it takes optimism, and that's my nature anyhow. Then I would say committed, because that's what we identify within communities for highest needs. So, and I just mixed that. That's my stance I'll catch my questions after Colby.
Great.
Be asking questions or just?
Do both. Very informal.
Everything's great.
You want them?
Ask lots of questions.
On the civic campus one, is that going to be an income restricted?
Yeah, all LIHTC project. Well, LIHTC usually uses market, has generally a few market rate, but the majority are income restricted.
What's the wait list at the Springs? And
Completely full, 100% all the time. They have a long wait list. Luckily, we know that.
ago, some heated
Some
meetings.
So just kind of some context, I guess, is we did have a nonprofit developer in the past who was interested in using the campus for a project. It was sort of a very quick turnaround. I would say that proposal envisioned the structure on, I guess, the south portion, and where it would require removing the senior center. And I think honestly, it was kind of the approach of that developer. It was a very, very fast turnaround, like unusually fast. And it was that developer going to the seniors and kind of telling them that the seniors go away, not a great approach in general. And so in this version, I think it will be a very different approach. I think it's also the siting of the building and looking at the feasibility, utilizing the northwest corner. We have some pretty steep grade changes there, and we have kind of a portion of the lot that's sort of treed right now, where I think we could take advantage of those elevation changes and maybe try to tuck that building in there so there's less impact. The majority of the public comments of the last proposal, and again, the developer had just asked the city council at the time if the city was willing to be a partner for the LIHTC application. There wasn't a lot of build up to thinking that through, really. It was just sort of an that came up, and we said, okay, council, what do you think? And so there was a lot of public comment. I would say the majority of it was from the seniors at the time, given the approach messaging around what was going to happen to their facility they're attached to. There was some opposition from people within Alpine Village, higher floors, that were concerned that that was going to block their view shed. And then there was actually a lot of support from, at that time, local employers, like, hey, we need this. I probably would live there, kind of thing. So yeah, so I think that was sort of the first. It was sort of fast and furious, not the right approach, probably not the right time, not the right siting. So I think this is an opportunity to really look at kind of feasibility, design, working with surrounding neighbors.
It's a really good question. A good question. And the answer seems like we've learned. Now we're better positioned.
Yeah, and I think, I think this proposal, at least conceptually, is looking at sort of the least amount of impact. So keeping the senior center where it is. This, this could be sort of the first phase of, a multiple phase project. But I do think, like, kind of tucking it in the corner, utilizing the topography, and then just having kind of a good sort of downtown infill or, even thinking about, park. I think there's a lot of things that could be put in here, and then kind of mitigate sort of the NIMBY.
At this point, what are your ideas for the campus? Some kind of civic space there.
I think we could. Do you want to?
No, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. I think we could do mixed use there. In our conversations, there's sort of like a balancing act of, do we put parking on the first floor, or do we put a commercial use? It's sort of tucked in the back corner, not easily accessible from a perspective, but isn't really conducive, but like a daycare or something like that certainly is a consideration, because it's already an existing parking lot, and by putting a building there, you'll be removing some spaces, and that could be some of the public comment about a loss of public spaces. The thinking was that at this point we had sort of we're thinking that putting parking on the main floor is probably our best strategy. The residents, we don't just remove spaces, and then also the residents use parking lot as theirs as well. So that would have the least amount of impact on the existing public amenity. But I think we can be convinced otherwise. It would not be uncommon for us to put some sort of space. And I think if there was a real clear need for it, an idea of what that might look like, then I think we would be very open to it. A lot of times in like a structure like this, you'll think about community space for the residents themselves, and that design strategy has changed just a little bit. A lot of times you might think of an apartment complex and then like a big community room. The design strategies are moving more to the neighborhood strategy, where you think of floors as a neighborhood and that they're more intimate, like neighborhood type spaces rather than big like large multi-purpose. So the residents themselves will have some opportunity to have spaces within the property itself, and then get to sort of imagined park.
Yeah, and I guess to add to the parking, like we live in a really snowy climate, and when I was talking to the Springs, I went and toured and met with the property manager, Eunice, and she's like, if you have any parking, cover them all, just please. Like, it just saves us so much effort and everything. And yeah, so just like given our climate, I think that was kind of the big
We also we looked at it. The other thing is that we also are cognizant that we're going to need more gear, and so wanting to make sure that there's like adequate space for people to have their bikes and skis and that. Just and then the other thing too is if we get pushed up against first, right? We get pushed up against first, we're going to have snow melt, sort of from that topography there. And so not having residential spaces on the first floor helps us to make sure that water can move through the property, to make sure that we don't end up with some sort of a unintended, just because of the, there'll be some coordination, of course, with like public works and how the snow plowing works on first, and snow storage will go that, but something that could be an advantage. The site itself is a non-residential or not.
It's not a
dignified.
Yeah. Great. That's.
So,
legislation is sure to go 5 stories. So it's very possible that you can go higher.
Our assumption is that we'll probably be limited in height by the flight path. I think it's right in that flight path there, and I think that'll probably be, the trees will probably still be the tallest.
Still a hill up higher.
Yeah.
Top of it.
Yeah, and the trees, right? But like our building height for the zoning is 50.
I think what you're hearing is, but let's continue on with the questions because it's really helpful. Yeah, thanks for something really.
But so, make sure, yeah, right. So this submitted through the funding request will be both projects simultaneously for the reasons that probably enhances our getting that point. This.
No, not necessarily. So like the LIHTC project would be the city campus one. The ownership opportunity would not be a LIHTC project. So they are 2 separate projects, but we feel like we need both, and like we feel ready to do both. So that's.
From a timing perspective, we should be able to move the home ownership portion of it faster. So the soonest the LIHTC project could get done is the application round is in August, and so we'd start working on it, right away to make sure that we're ready for application season. And that there's only 1 application round, and then when they're awarded right at this time of the year, and so you don't usually start construction until a year after. So if we win in the first go round, sometimes it takes multiple rounds to get funded. The soonest it would be is start of construction would be when construction season starts in 27. In theory, the homeownership piece of it, you know, sort of the asterisk is we still need to have some conversations with the sewer district. But assuming that we can work with that, we could start the construction of that project in this construction season 26. So it would, a few funding elements need to come together, but we largely build those projects without a large federal funding. And I also appreciate it, and I think one of the comprehensive plan comments was the facilitating of state and federal funding. There is no state funding, and so it's, well, I love it sitting there. It's like optimistic that maybe someday there'll be state funding. So there isn't, by and large. So we use more of a charitable approach. We've developed a down payment assistance program, and then we actually just got the green light yesterday on a pilot with a local bank that's going to give us low cost first mortgage financing for users, which really allows us to kind of do that a lot more naturally and less dependent a large funding. So we should be able to move the homeownership one, if everything goes well, ahead of the other one.
Will it be kind of the structures of this work?
It'll probably be a little different. It'll probably be just deed restrictions, and just be locals, like non-locals can't buy it. So like the ground lease program, anybody can buy it, but it just varies the rent depending on if you're local. So yeah.
So you would like.
Yes, yeah, I mean, or I guess they wouldn't be buying the dirt. It'd probably be more like a, it wouldn't be, the city would still own the land, but you'd be buying the structure kind of like a condo kind of situation.
Yeah, they end up with essentially, I think they would functionally end up with a leasehold interest, which is a fee. So the land would still be held in trust so that it ensures that it stays perpetually affordable. And then that relationship then can govern and affect the deed restrictions of your appreciation caps or anything.
Yeah, and the McCall Avenue is basically a product of the community housing day and market crashing. Then so it's not really exactly what we're existing. So whatever model we end up using for Flint.
Yeah, and then also other communities use, like not McCall Avenue, but what we're proposing.
Michelle made that comment that instead of a stepping aspect, it climbing a mountain. And I'm thinking, how do we keep that mountain step of those 16 units? So then I think the mortgage and those other opportunities that would say, and the two questions I'd have about that is somewhat the size. So are we looking at 1,000 square feet or 800 to 1,000 somewhere there, which means affordability? I'm always impressed with the average house that we call 2,000. But I mean that aspect of that site extension, which to me means is a step in the right direction. That not everybody's looking for 3 bedrooms, 2. So that's one thing that be kind of a statement. And we want to endorse. And the other thing then we think of is what are the other partnerships, and to me that's private personal. I would like to list in that some. I think there is some kind of because I think even that step, to some extent, is subsidized. Subsidized by what? And the mortgage rate is one of subsidies. But I just a bunch of what are the other potential subsidies that, and we know there's some people around here who are interested. Cable, how that might fit the bill.
I think that level of detail will come back to you. I think this is just kind of, again, first touch, getting a general sense. Do you want us to explore the feasibility and pursue some of these things? And then there'll be a number of steps at which we'll need to bring you specific documents in which prove in order for things to move forward. I think we don't have that. I mean, I think we need to explore some of those things. We haven't put them.
It's not shovel ready.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting, though, just to add, because the last question is really interesting. When you talk about subsidies, the first big step is the city land.
Yeah.
So there's your first step in the right direction. And we can tell you that in our experience, when the city gets behind something, or the employment base or the community leaders get behind something, it's much more compelling to charitable capital to be able to help bring in those other subsidies. So I think this is the right first step to really build that kind of momentum, attractiveness to those other subsidies here.
And in reality, 16 units on 2 acres, that's a size cap on it. Any, you know, it would be.
Our average, you can think of a lot of our housing product in our community land trust is all, think of it as kind of starter home size. Probably, I would say probably across the portfolio, it probably averages right at 1,000 square feet. Most common unit size is a 3-bedroom in that 1,000 square foot range. And then in mountain towns, we're beginning to just do a little bit more demographic work around what the missing housing units are. We're seeing sometimes that there's a need to have some smaller footprint, even smaller than that, maybe 2-bedroom products that are needed because of just some of the makeup of kind of the doesn't always include a family size. And so some of that demographic data and the housing studies that have been done before will help inform what the mix of those will be. But are sort of on average about 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, our possibility to look at land in some other aspect of tiny homes and what tiny home is. Home project, but just the same, that is an opportunity for some other time too. It's attractive to an element of our people. That's my environmental position in life. Or it's what I want.
Guys, like, luckily this is just a first step and we have more city land. So.
I just had a quick question. By the time.
There's the minimum threshold is that it's properly zoned and that it's annexed if it was outside the city. So I think both of those, we're not anticipating a zone change. So I think both of those, we meet those minimum thresholds. It strengthens it. If we have to sort of articulate the path to entitlement. And so then it becomes the kind of gray area that the state housing agency will sort of determine its readiness beyond that. And so the more entitlement ready we can make it, the better. So it doesn't have to be like, we don't have to have permit in hand, because we won't, in this stage, we won't pull a full set of construction documents. It'll be more conceptual. So as far as we can move the process, maybe, thinking about density, proper utilization of this, I think that would help the state agency. If this is approved, they can finish the
Been any discussions with the super? We've been pulled up projects. But I think that is immediately depends on your grant, the time frame that will allow. thought on that, that maybe helps incentivize, oh, offer out of units their employees as a just as a thought. I think the component is and it should and capacity.
Yeah, we have scheduled a meeting with them. And yeah, when I met with the sewer district, and it seemed supportive of local housing, so we're hopeful and well, yeah, see if we have the capacity. So because we just don't know at this.
One of the benefits of the city campus location is it's also within our district. So that allows us additional funding as well as the ability to sort of dictate development stuff and yeah, as it relates to infrastructure. Yeah, so kind of we're very aware of the issue.
Thank you for that. It is important.
Sizes, priorities.
Flint State is, is that
Yes.
what it is?
Yeah, and you can get the double density because of the
Again, the sewer district, our zoning is different than their density, so.
Any other questions or comments from planning and zoning? Council as well.
I always try. Business, my employees. Hi. Of money that you have to wait. Hire some consultant.
What's your business? I'm just curious. I was like, I'm not gonna guess what that is because I might have found something. All right, I'll find out.
Station.
Ah, okay, nice.
I think going housing trust. We have some units because there are 3-bedroom units, single people in.
4-bedroom.
4-bedroom. And bigger need is, especially wise, is one. You get more units in 1-bedrooms that make work. Yeah. A lot of space going to waste. 1 to 2 bedrooms. Those in and maybe get a few more.
So in a lot of the conferences I've been at recently, I've been approached by a number of developers that want to come into Valley County. I just want to make sure legally this doesn't have to go through an RFP because you're expending city resources. I mean, I love Bart and I love what they're, and we've spent a lot of time together, but there are a number of people looking to Valley County. So I'm just saying, make sure you get the best project.
Is it Valley County specifically or is it McCall?
They're doing a complex right now in Cascade and actually have expressed interest in Valley County, as a whole, as Bart has too. But I just want to make sure that, legally you don't have to open it up because it is resources.
We've already looked at it.
But I'd love to hear chat more.
So there, I just want to make sure the other item. I don't know if there's any last questions.
And I have some prior experience with Morton reputation. The value their organization. I'm really glad that Leap is here, 3 people strong.
So Michelle, I didn't want to.
That one last.
Just real quick, when we did Springs, we had to get that in Valley County, and there was a little bit of a resistance. A couple of the board did some previous things that had all, and so we came up with this deal that them and their attorney that that they're a partner in the deal for as long as the deal goes. So the component I'm trying to explain, the city will always own the land, what's the dirt. So there'll never be an issue of Bart saying, "Oh, I want to retire. I'm going to." That'll never happen. And go to some of these mountain areas. That's I think the back to the citizens that we'll always have that ownership of the land.
Yeah,
that's it.
Even if we determine that transferring the land, like conveying the land to the housing trust made the most sense, there's a reversion clause in there that says if this ever gets used for something other than what was intended for, it gets reverted back to the original. So there's these making sure these protections are all throughout to make sure that.
Yeah, I think the Springs, like the county did that, they conveyed the land with a deed restriction that says it will be used for this before closing, and at which point it doesn't. There's like a reversion clause in there. So you guys ended up, or Valley County ended up conveying it, but I think, yeah, we would need to explore all the different models of long-term lease.
Right, I think you didn't got giving you a direction on that, right, about the steps and great work on that. I would suggest we have a little 5-minute stand-up break.
Sounds good.
Next topic.
Great.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. You guys are hanging out in the hall. It's like
yeah.
beautiful weather.
we can be heard.
Okay, we're back. So this is our second item, which is a work session on zoning code amendments related to Title II, which is building, Title III, zoning, and just subdivision and development. Again, just to kind of get the sort of overall bigger picture, we are in the process of making a selection for consultants related to the comprehensive plan, the transportation master plan, and design guidelines. And so typically what you do is you get your comp plan, you get your vision, goals, and strategies set, and then you develop your code amendments sort of based on that. We have some urgency in some amendments, mostly related to Valley County deciding to significantly reduce and take over the administration of McCall Impact Area and apply Valley County codes, multi-use zone, and comp plan to those areas outside the city limits. So basically moving all area planning and zoning just involves the city limits. That's what staff will be administering, and McCall City Council will be determining the policy in that area. So in the past, when we were setting policy, we were the commissioners and the city council that we basically had agreement, across both jurisdictions, and then essentially each governing board of their respective policies. So because we're moving away from that model that we had in place for 47 years and moving to just manage limits, there's kind of some urgency in changing some language. So basically, Valley County has set the timeline of taking over administration starting January 1. So kind of the urgency on this work session. We hired Jen and Melissa, who are on the call. Logan Simpson, they're really good code writers. And the reason we brought them in was on the fast timeline. But two, we also envision as we move through the sort of long range planning process that rather than waiting the end of 2 years and then updating codes, we want to be able to incrementally change codes so that we can be more effective. I know the council has a lot of interest in changing the design guidelines and not waiting till the end. So this actually exercise gave them an opportunity to get familiar with us, our codes, so that they kind of know as it well. So with that, Meredith's going to give you an overview of sort of what the code amendments entail. The urgency again was initially triggered by the impact area, but while we're doing that, we realized there's a number of other things that could happen in this. I'll let you kind of high level that.
Yeah.
Get into the details.
Meredith Todd, City and Sustainability Planner, and you do still have the Planning and Zoning Commission with us in the room. So I'll just touch on the bullet points in the staff memo that kind of summarize the major touch points for the code amendment. So reiterating what Michelle said, a large part of the text that we're touching is just language that references the area of impact and his jurisdiction for administration. The one particular question that you all brought up last night while we were reappointing Commissioner Petty to the Planning and Zoning Commission relates to the language amending how the commission works. So that is included in this code amendment. Be moving from a 7-member commission to we're recommending a 5-member commission of members from city limits. And then there's kind of a rollover clause drafted within that commission description section where any member who's in service on January 2026 will serve out a 3-year term. So that would be our 4 existing city limits commissioners that are all currently appointed. And then we would start the cycle of getting people into new 3-year terms as city limits residents. In that section, one change that we're recommending, but would be really happy with some discussion on, are qualifications or minimum makeup of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So right now, there's just general language about having interest or broad experience in the world of development. but no distinct requirement for folks from different backgrounds. So we're recommending that no more than 2 members serve from the same background at the same time. And we include an example in there where no more than 2 real estate backgrounds or no more than 2 contracting backgrounds, so that there is some diversity when we look at development projects where multiple perspectives could be represented on that board. We're also recommending, but not married to the exact language we have right now, that city residency be required for only a 1-year term as long as they've been in the Valley County area for 2, so that it's easier for folks that might be in situations of housing instability or renting to be eligible, since it can be hard to establish a really, really long-term housing unit, especially for younger folks, and it would be cool to see multiple generations represented on the board at the same time. So those are big ones within the composition of the commission itself for discussion. And then the bullet point on the new definition of hotel, we may or may not reference state code on that one, but we wanted to remedy the language as it currently stands. Most of our hotels might not actually make sense as hotels because they have multiple buildings. So we just want to make sure that hotels that operate as hotels and have multiple buildings on their property still count as hotels. The change of care center arose from over last year. We had a daycare that received a pretty large grant because it was located in an already permitted, yes, commercial building, but in an R8 zone. They actually had to go through quite an extensive process. Back when we initially adopted the code in 2006, the state wasn't as deeply involved in daycare licensing as they are now. So it just kind of makes sense at the city level to step back from daycare management since the state and fire districts administer that really well now. So it would still be required to get additional permitting in the really, really low density residential zones as well as the highest density residential zones to manage things like parking. But our limited R8 zones are really kind of designed to be that buffer between neighborhood and commercial area where most of the buildings are already capable of many children running at once. The 5th bullet point relating to storage facilities, self-service, and warehouse. The last 5 years have been a challenge, I think, in the land use world of really understanding that warehousing and storage facilities may just not be compatible with our community zoning areas, both from an aesthetic and use perspective. So we thought we might put it in here for your consideration as a quick thing to just not even worry about storage anymore in jurisdiction, since it hasn't really met the mark on being a highest and best use.
Meredith, if I could just add, this is sort of the one like policy piece in all of these code amendments. I would sort of classify the rest of them as sort of cleanup or just like slight modifications, but not like a policy shift. That's the one shift identified as the storage. I think part of the rationale is why are we permitting self-storage in a jurisdiction that has utilities? We're seeing a lot of storage happening in the county in general. And we've even seen projects that were slated for, say, apartments and ultimately self-storage. And so kind of just looking at that, what's the highest and best use of development do you want? So that is sort of a policy question as part of this.
A small one, we've always really constituted the idea of a boat ramp or very straight structure within the shoreline zone as harm to the shoreline area, but it's never been explicitly stated that private boat ramps are harmful. So we're recommending a clear prohibition on private boat ramps, as I've seen quite a few lake-facing roll-up garage doors in the last few years, and had to negotiate through that and say, no, that really doesn't serve our shoreline goals. So making it clear just mitigates that need to negotiate on the matter further. And then just a couple cleanups to footnotes that currently reference to nowhere, but used to reference to somewhere, making those reference correctly. And then finally, Making sure we can add language in the way we conduct the public hearings to give reference to that SIR rebuttal concept that was brought up earlier in the year, where if new evidence is presented in the rebuttal by an applicant, any members of the public have the opportunity to also comment on that new evidence in another round. So we may not have the sentence structure on that one perfectly right, but we'll legal counsel getting that language correct. I know you got a comment related to that today, and we'll track. With that, I can stand for any high-level questions or let Melissa and Jen start to walk you through the 67 pages.
Recognizing that we only have 20 minutes left. Yes. And maybe Jen and Melissa, if you guys could just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your experience and the work that you do, that'd be helpful because you're.
Awesome. I can go first, and then we'll let Melissa take the show from there. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. It's really a pleasure to be in front of you all today. We've been working with the city of McCall, as you guys know, Logan Simpson, the firm anyway, for many years. But for myself, I'm a 25-year veteran of landscape architecture planning and code development. And I lead up our code team. Melissa is my very strong right hand in the code team, so I'll let her give you a little bit of a background as well.
Can you guys hear me? I just lost audio.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
I can hear you, but I couldn't hear Jen. That's fun. Hi, I'm Melissa Ruth. As Jen said, kind of her right hand on all things code. Most of what I do is land use code updates. But I also do comprehensive plans kind of throughout the West. I'm based in Wyoming, but I've worked all over Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, all the things. I grew up in a ski town, so I'm very familiar with ski town kind of backgrounds, environments, politics, all the things. So just excited to kind of be a part of the process and help you all out.
I have a question for Mayor Bob, and we're looking at 20 minutes. Can we say we're going to run 15 minutes over, or the time to look and say we don't have to rush quite as much as we were intending? What's the capacity to?
I think we can get through the information. Melissa, do you think you can get through the information in about 15? That would give then the council some time after to ask questions and in the in zoning commission.
Yeah.
I don't have a hard.
Might lose one or two. Yeah, we'll try to get it done in the allotted time. I didn't actually think this, but we'll see how far we get.
Do we all see a Word document? Yeah. Great. So Meredith kind of ran through the high level of the changes. The only thing that changed in Title II is references to the McCall area of impact. There's a few of them, and essentially what we did is we just removed any language that said city was managing impact area or anything about regulations related to the impact area. Kind of what we did was we just deleted that reference to keep it as simple and clean as possible. There's still probably going to be a little bit of cleanup for a couple specific things related to other sections of the code down in Title IX, but that's more of a kind of long-term effort specifically related to, I think it was water and sewer. Right, Michelle? Meredith? Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So that's the only thing that changed in Title II. You'll see there's a couple strike-throughs throughout some of the different sections, but nothing else really changed in this whole title. So a couple references in Chapter 1, a couple in Chapter 2, No changes overall in chapters 3 or 4. Questions on Title 2?
No, but on the whole thing, we'll get a red line before we have to really approve something, right? So we can
Yes.
say
Work session. So the next step would be, we would get feedback from the council. We develop the ordinances and then it runs to look at the kind of a draft of.
Good question. Title 3, Chapter 1, again, the only thing that changed is the references to the area of city impact and pulling some of the more extensive language, putting this onus back on the county to have all of the information about what the extent is and managing that. The definition of hotel motel, as Meredith mentioned, we updated to align more closely with state code and some of your current circumstances, and then a couple other additional references throughout to the area of city impact. Chapter 3. This is where the changes to the care center allowance and then the storage units are throughout this section and the next couple of sections. So as Michelle said, the storage units is really the only policy change in this whole piece. So are there any questions, comments, concerns about this kind of showing self-service storage facility and storage facility warehouse as prohibited throughout the code in the various zone districts?
That would be like a contractor yard. So we're specifically targeting the metal buildings with folks to store their stuff indoors, city limit. Yep. As well as we put warehousing on here. We haven't had any warehousing applications, but from the aesthetic and communication perspective, those seemed to be likely to cause similar problems if were to come in. It's a very, very large building that doesn't necessarily utilize infrastructure efficiently. So
how would this affect the property owner?
I've not seen those. That would probably be considered a mixed-use workshop building, not a storage facility.
The challenge we have within the city limits is we don't have a lot of remaining large, say like large. We do have some, depending on what zone it is, we do have some kind of development standards, essentially to kind of shrink or a bit or sort of the big box concept. So we have maximums is 10,000 zones. We don't have a lot of industrially. And so, I mean, we kind of have a lack of that light industrial. And that's what we identified. You know, how do we create more areas where we have those so we can encourage economic development that's maybe not like massive distribution center, but it's maybe these smaller scale kinds of businesses that need. Oh, that's again, like that's a policy question.
That was pre this. Future application.
So for example, like the
That's a great.
yeah, I mean, I think an example of it would be the project you saw on the corner of Winston and Rio Vista. It was that but is basically a 5-acre piece that was for sale. A number of people wanted to do residential development, all kind of different iterations. Sewer districts that we're not going to serve it at this current time. The city actually rezoned it because he wanted it to like go to higher density residential. Ultimately, it transferred, and then it became for. And so that's a 5-acre piece that was located, you know, and I think a good location at middle high density residential lost towards ridge. And that's the thing I always say, like when you have projects, you're in it for like so once you approve these things, they tend to be there for a long and we're just seeing this like unit thing. Meredith has been, I think in her tenure of being the city planner, kind of feels like she's a storage unit planner. And so there was just concerns about bringing that forward. Is this sort of highest and best use for our community? I know planning and zoning, especially as really a lot of these were in the impact area, has really, how do we make neighborhoods? What component? Is it the appropriate use? Is there a way to design them to make it in, that sort of thing? It's been a real challenge. Why we're bringing it.
Part of it too, like with the development and the need for storage units for residential, you need to word it somewhere that it goes, if you have 30 units residential, and then build 30 storage units for those residents, not rented out, not at a commercial component. That building is designed to storage for enter.
So maybe include language that if it's exclusive to a family project and not commercial,
Yeah,
can receive an exception.
it can't be rented out. It's the unit designated type, because the other projects that have very limited space and they can has toys, and some of them maybe not have room for a budget in that, or they can that in, but maybe something that would allow that with in conjunction with the residential.
And then
Oh yeah, yeah.
Then I have a follow-up question to your comment, Colby, because I think it's a good one. Would this group on warehousing to manage the aesthetic concern be interested in any of the following? Requesting that it be a secondary use to something else on the property, having it be located behind or to the side of a more pedestrian-oriented use, or requiring that it not occupy greater than a certain percentage of buildable area. Just wait and see what happens, since we don't get a whole at this point.
Very designated area. That the logic that get redeveloped, smaller lots may be caught up and combined, and business that I don't know.
You could keep
I'm
it.
too jaded to continue. I think in everything.
You could keep it a conditional use, and then it's just evaluated on basically.
I wouldn't want to discuss it on today's limited time, but I think the recreational vehicle, look at that and for time to look at you people. But look what the pressure you're feeling on that. Don't go into it now.
Yeah, I think you will have opportunities, because we'll do like a full code assessment and we'll be revisiting all these things. Again, I think the primary goal, eliminate the area of impact, get the commission set so we're good starting January. And then this issue of self-storage is one, just because constantly is this, if it's an urgent policy issue, we can address it in this round. If you feel like you need time or need studying, we can take it in the next round. So we threw it in there just because Meredith is
Storage
I think it's good in this round, and I think that it's important to be able to tie storage to developments. It just came up in this project in the civic camp for expensive or
Okay, I think I have all that in my notes. Continue, Melissa.
Okay, good, because you guys are cutting in and out a little bit, so I'll need some help with notes. And I did keep these notes here, so I have something. Chapter 4, commercial, where am I? Commercial uses, commercial zone standards. The only change here again is the storage units, and then we did correct this footnote here for mixed use currently goes nowhere. So we fixed it to reference the current or the correct section. So just a reference update there. Chapter 5, again, storage units update. And same with chapter. So that's 5. No changes in 6, so no changes in the airport, civic, fort, ag uses or ag zones. Special districts, the only change here, again, is the area of city impact references and then clearly prohibiting private boat ramps. So we changed a couple of references that just said boat ramps to clearly reference public boat ramps. And then I think in a section down below, we added private boat ramps to prohibited uses. Yes.
Does the private boat ramps prohibition request make sense? This group making it clearly stated for residential projects. Yeah, so they can still put the roll-up garage door unless it violates those aesthetic concerns, but no longer can there be like a straight line designed, obviously a boat ramp going into that garage in which you would crank a boat up.
So for example, a gravel structure or seems very city limit.
Those that are grandfathered in will keep it, and
No one succeeded in convincing me that what looks like a boat ramp was not a boat ramp, so there are none to grandfather in. It would just be the end of arguing with people about that looks like a boat ramp.
The way that the code's currently written, you can kind of link some code sections to say this is not allowable. Because we're getting this, we're specifically saying rather than trying to link together, we're trying to say this is not allowed. That's to be very clear, so it doesn't become big long distance.
But somebody could still find a way to drag or
Sure.
That's fair.
I think the reality too is the majority of front property. You don't. They modify. Yeah, so this is just applying to the city, that portion of shoreline that's within.
This doesn't affect their ability to get dock permits or any of those below the high water IDL. They're still allowed to access pathways within that 50-foot area and small hitting areas that are 8 feet in. So it's really just nothing on wheels is going back and forth. Okay, onward, Melissa. Thank you.
This section currently updates to remove area of city impact. This is a section that probably further down the line will revise these references to refer to an official map that's actually adopted by the council to make this a little bit easier so you don't have to maintain a list of bullets. But that's a future update that we've kind of talked about with staff for now. Kept it pretty simple.
the descriptions of the specific scenic routes?
Yes.
Instead of the list, start working on that and maybe amend the map from time.
We can try to know a lot of the real estate offices. Those and let everybody know, hey,
Yeah.
don't get the big ones, so you're not looking at those, not thinking in the city limits.
I think the reality of that is that basically it's the city limit. Because even if you're in all impact area, it's Valley County Corporation. In essence, Valley County. So it's not really an impact area, so it doesn't really,
Nothing's gonna change in the,
it's really
this
just
part of it that was gonna be a little.
nothing. So it really is just city limits or junction between it.
Any real relevance for the area?
Thought there was, yeah. So I guess it would.
Being on a map, there's, I mean, sure it is.
Maybe they don't need new. Or they need new maps to probably just show the city. Everything outside is multi-use, Valley County. Go to Cass.
That show the density in the. Yeah.
Hey, next, Melissa.
Okay. In the development standards chapter, the only change here is listing those couple of things that we noted as prohibited, so private boat ramps, storage facilities. We do need to add the rest of the definition here for those self-service and warehousing. So that will be added, as well as a fuel islands in the scenic route overlay, which is prohibited, but we wanted to make it super clear. Again, another text kind of cleanup note. That is the extent of the changes in Title 3 all the way through Chapter 11. Chapter 12 is the Planning and Zoning Commission. So this is where those updates that Meredith was mentioning are. So that 7 to 5 members, the resident period of at least a year in the city, and then Valley County for overall 2 years. And then this note here about the number of planning commission members that could represent similar professions. So a limit on 2, and we listed a few examples.
Feel about that composition. Questions?
Just on the real estate sector, or
Which is basically association of a realtor, a real estate agent. Almost everybody's a realtor. Either way, you have to be part of the movement.
I think we.
And I think we capture generally that with substantially similar professions where broker, agent, associate, same bucket.
All right, Melissa.
Okay. And then this last one in Chapter 15, Procedures, Appeals, and Action is that SIR rebuttal language. So in the section, where am I? Conduct of hearings, we added a line or a sentence under K at the end of the public testimony that says that if the applicant brings new information in their public comment address, the commissioner's council shall open the hearing to receive additional public testimony limited to the new matter / information. I believe you do have a public comment on this one.
Yeah, once we have, okay, so the public comments again after the applicant's rebuttal. And do we have to give the applicant another rebuttal based on what the public new comment was? And then what if he says more new information then? How far does that go?
So the way that we've structured this, we've tested it a couple times with the mayor without this being in the code, where the mayor will ask staff, did you hear any new information in the applicant's rebuttal from what is already in the record or how addressed? Say yes or no and identify what that information is. Depending on what like the context is, like did they present a whole brand new traffic study that nobody's ever looked at suddenly that requires a engineer's review? And both the public would get the opportunity to make comment on that, but the general recommendation would probably be we should continue this to take this new information under advisement and allow all parties. So it hopefully wouldn't go on into infinity and would continue to discourage applicants from bringing new information on the day of the meeting outside of the packet materials. But there is opportunity for there to be a additional back end. But legal did agree that it's important to add this for due process with liabilities.
I feel like we always applicant.
This part is after the public comment happens. So after the public comment, the applicant is given a rebuttal to any comments heard or the staff's report. Can you scroll up to D, Melissa? Yeah. I think in our bylaws, we have it where the applicant goes first, which bend the order a bit, that's okay.
That's all. And as the
We changed that after kind of going through some, like I think at a conference. We used to do it that staff would present first, and then it kind of staff's like in the project. And so we decided to let the developer go first, and then we can summarize in the like the staff report and add any additional. Yeah, I think like council don't use staff first.
Yeah, yes, we do.
So we do it back again. Do it both ways.
I believe it's okay memorialized in code this way and then amended via the bylaws. That preference. I can ask legal. Go code.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll look at that.
A really good point, though, that when staff introduces it first, it looks like it's endorsement from staff.
Not always.
Depends what we say, but
It feels that way to the public.
yeah, and that's why we. Plus, I feel like it's their responsibility to present their project, not for us. And then for us to provide that analysis of the information. It also gives us the opportunity, imagine that at some point, cited a presentation, and then we verify that as part of that.
It helps. I think it limits some of the public to applicant says something that maybe is not quite right. Staff corrects it, that might stop some people from, oh yeah, okay. I think that process definitely.
So council, we had a discussion about this in the rebuttal issue, and that was similar to the talked about this a lot with legal that they'll but their Idaho case quasi-judicial body has the applicant have affected, so there's that balancing process. Have to step on the right applicant edit that will same as a code.
Onward, Melissa.
I I believe the rest of the changes through this whole title are just related to the area of city impact. Yes. And then everything in Title IX, so subdivision and development, is removing references to the area of city impact. So that's the extent of the changes in Title IX. So I'll stop scrolling and pause for any additional questions that you all might have.
I don't have anything.
No, that'll be a future code amendment. Do that. This is just really time. Yeah. Yeah.
Keep beating the drum.
Any other questions? Apologize that we went over. Making them silent. This is great.
So I guess we need a direction to prepare ordinances and public hearings for do this.
Before. That's the plan. Is for this.
Great. Is there anything else?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Is there good with that too? Ernie?
They need to adjourn separately.
To adjourn separately.
We need to adjourn.
One of you,
What?
motion to adjourn yourselves.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Listen, Jen, thank you. Appreciate it. We're gonna see you again soon.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, you bet.